All right. So this is a lesson that a now retired teacher and I had put together a couple years ago. Um, y'all remember Mr. Goodman, business teacher, also a lawyer. So he came to me and said, "Hey, I want to do a comparison of renting versus buying a house." Okay, we are all need a place to live, right? I'm gonna go sit amongst you guys. Can I sit in the back row over here? Is this gonna offend anybody? Oh man, he's sitting amongst us, treating us like freshmen. No, I just want to sit. All right. So, this information comes from April 13th, 2021. So this will be outdated a little bit, but we'll get the gist of it. So, when you buy a house, you more than likely don't have the money up front. You look at getting yourself a 30-year mortgage. Okay, yes, you can do mortgages on different amounts of time. I've seen some of the companies that are now going up to 40 years because the price of houses is going up dramatically in certain areas, aka Colorado. So let's talk about this and just do a little bit of a comparison. So let's say, and again, this is last year's data, so it's going to be down a little bit. So let's say we are looking at a $500,000 home, okay, which right now would probably be a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom falling down. Mr. Dwyer, who would you like? Parrish?
Only tracking down about a month.
Okay.
They're avoiding me.
Is he in trouble again?
Oh.
Cool. All right, so let's say you wanted to buy a $500,000 house. Well, they require you to put 20% down, which is $100,000 that you have to put down for a house. Okay? Which is kind of a lot of money to come up with. Yes, you can put less down, but then you have to pay a PMI, which is a mortgage insurance, which is non-recoverable money, and that's basically an insurance policy that they force you to buy, that if you default on your loan, the insurance that they're buying pays your debt, but the debt is still against you, so it protects the companies. All right, so that means if you were to put all that back down, you still have $400,000 that you have to somehow pay off over the next 30 years. Okay? If you were to do this, I don't have our interest rate. So we're looking at, this is not including any taxes, but you're going to pay this much per month for 30 years. Which, if you go and you figure this out, this would mean that you're going to drop $633,600 for your $500,000 house. Okay, which isn't bad. And this was basing off when mortgage rates were a little bit lower. This would be a little bit more these days because your mortgage is going with that. So what this comes down to is, because you put the $100,000 down on your house, means you're going to drop $733,600 for your house that cost you $500,000. Okay, so you're looking at $233,600 in interest that you would pay. Okay, you still following me on that? All right, so other things that do take place. Some of the taxes, and again, this is last year's information. Might have changed. The Denver area has a 0.5% tax based on the home. So this would mean that you are going to drop $2,800 in just taxes in the Denver area on your house, which costs you $233 extra a month. So you tag that $233 into the $1,760. Okay. Homeowners insurance. So insurance that you have to have on your home, on average, as far as last year, is going to cost you about $100 per month. So now this fee here is getting more and more because your homeowner's insurance is tagged to your mortgage payment itself. So this is going to come to roughly this much money per month to be living in this $500,000 home. Okay? Other things to take into. So now if everything stayed consistent, if I multiply this times the 360, that's now going to increase what you needed to pay for this house to roughly this over 30 years if everything stayed appropriate, which is kind of a lot of money. You're putting $253,480 into a house that cost you $500,000. Hopefully, the market continues to appreciate, so your money continues to, grow with you. Okay, so that's a dramatic amount of money. Okay, your payment each month. So I'm going to highlight this because we'll come back to this. This is your monthly payment in which you're going to drop that kind of money on a $500,000 house as far as last year's information went. Okay? If you moved into one of our illustrious HOA communities, okay, there's also monthly information with that. The average amount as far as last year went was $300 per month that you're paying in HOA fees. So they maintain and harass your neighbors that has a weed that grows in their yard. I'm not talking weed like marijuana weed. I'm talking like weeds like dandelions and stuff. So if you had been doing this times 12 times 30 is going to come out to $108,000 more just on HOA fees. Okay, so that basically, now where's that 150? And then we also have found that repair costs on a home, on average, as far as last year goes, would cost you roughly $5,000 per year. Okay, so just normal update stuff. Over 30 years, we're talking $150,000 in just repair costs. And so then we have an overall total of the HOA, the repair, and this of $1,111,480 that you have now spent over 30 years on a house that cost you $500,000. Okay. So this is a lot of information to try and say, gosh, should I even buy a house or not? Well, maybe. Okay. Now, let's talk about rent. Now, things with rent that you would have to know. Let's say you are renting the same house that would have been $500,000 at the time. Now, rent does indeed increase, but this is going to cost you $2,500 per month, and that $2,500 a month has an awful lot of stuff that is embedded. You would also probably want to have renter's insurance, which is about $204 per month. And this protects your stuff if something were to happen. If the house were to catch fire, rather than you losing all of your assets, this $204 would then cover that. And then $204 is per year. So that means that you're basically looking at the $2,500 per month plus the $17 per month. This is $17 per month. at 360 payments, so your 30 years, is going to run you $906,120. Okay, so if we subtract what our $1 million, if we had bought that house with all of our repair costs and stuff, subtracting our $906,120 means that we would have net gained $205,360. So if we chose to rent for 30 years, which I guess you could, a lot of things that take place with rent that are unrealized. So let's say in your rental, the refrigerator is part of it. The refrigerator goes out. The person that you're renting the house from will pay to have that refrigerator fixed. You have a leaky toilet or a leaky sink. The person who is the homeowner will pay for that to be done. The HOA cost already goes into that $2,500 per month. So again, the homeowner is taking care of that. So you're talking about, a $200,000 difference between the two if you chose to rent. Now, let's get a little silly. So let's take that $205,000. Let's see. Let's just talk stock market. And if we just stayed with about a 9.7% index fund, if we just use the simple equation, this is going to show if I just put $100,000 down that you're going to save, or was your first $100,000 that you would have had to put down on a 20% interest house, this $100,000 is going to earn you over the 30 years that much money. Okay? So, and again, this is just a simple scenario of looking at it, but if you went through so if you realize the difference in the payments, the one-time $100,000 down, and then if you continue to add the difference between the two, between the rental and the monthly rental and the monthly costs, if you were to add this, if you were to continue with this by putting this in per month into the same market, this is going to get you this much that you have now in savings. Okay? So, is it better to buy the house or to rent the house? Well, let's see. I dropped over $1 million on this house. Now, I own this house outright and clear, and it is very possible this $500,000 house over 30 years would cost more than the $1 million that you had put in originally. Or if you took a look at renting and staying with the averages and investing your difference and realizing what your difference is, including putting that initial $100,000 into an account, $3 million is in your pocket, and you're living in a house that you don't necessarily own, but you have $3 million in money for your retirement. So, is it better to rent or is it better to own? And that's a big question that a lot of people, they want to know. Okay, what are some downfalls of being in a rental? Well, if you are in an area that has a lot of rentals, you might have different neighbors a lot more often than if you moved into a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of rentals, where you might have your neighbors that as you got married and you chose to have kids, your kids get to grow up with the same kind of people all around you. Okay? And it was interesting. It was fun putting this together with Mr. Goodman and talking about it, and it just kind of started putting me into perspective going, should I have bought my house? The nice thing is our house was paid for pretty quickly. but I have repair costs on my house that still show up. So my monthly money on my house versus me personally buying a rent or renting a rental, did it make sense for me to do what I did? I don't know. I guess I could crunch the numbers. My wife and I act like we still have a mortgage. So we pay into our mutual funds the mortgage payment. We also pay into our mutual funds what we would have already put in. So we're kind of like doubling up what we're putting into the market, which when I look at my financial plan, it looks pretty good. But this might be something to think about. The hard thing about a rental, and this goes along with real estate, any of you think about going into real estate, realtors will tell you location, location, location is the most important thing for you. You find that ideal dream house on the perfect neighborhood that you think that you can live for 30 years or more, that's great. But when I was living back in Nevada, one of my biggest frustrations as a homeowner, because Nevada is a larger transient state, meaning people are moving in and moving out a lot more rapid than here. You know, when I taught in Vegas, I would start with 30 kids in a class, and by the end of the school year, I still had 30 kids in the class, but there were probably 15 of them who had moved out and or moved in. So I didn't see the same people. But when I owned a house in Nevada, it was frustrating. Here I have my house, and when you own a house, you have pride of ownership. And yes, if you have a rental, there are certain things that are expected by contract that you have to keep up, you know, such as the yards. You can't just have things dumped there. You can't have pallets of plywood and pallets of wood and stuff like that. You know, there's things to protect the neighborhood somewhat, but you also have people who are renters. And when I was in Nevada, the guy on either side of me was a rental, and the guy right behind me was a rental. And there were every now and then characters that moved in those places where it's like, I have 2 daughters. I'm not too comfortable having, you know, those guys who are throwing beer cans all over the place, those guys who I don't even know who they are, but I think there's something silly going on in their lives. The guy behind me, I think, was breeding pit bulls. Not that I have a problem with pit bulls. It's just when you have young children under the age of 3 and you have a wooden slated fence and they're figuring, oh, look, doggy, and they stick their finger through, and whatever dog it is might munch their finger off. So not that you couldn't have people who are breeding dogs that own a house, but every now and then you might come across a little bit different household environment. So what do you gain with a rental? Well, $3 million is pretty cool if you played along with this game, but is it really in the long run worth it for you in life? I don't know. Okay, I've been pretty fortunate in my neighborhood, or at least on my street. Though some houses have gone up for sale, the person that lives to the east of us is an original owner. He's been there for as long as we've been in our house. The person diagonally across the street, same thing. Right across the way, that house sold about 15 years ago, and it's been the same people. People that are diagonally to my right or diagonally to the west, there was a nice couple that was living there, and then a retired couple bought that house because they wanted to move to Colorado and be closer to their kids. The guy that lives immediately to the west of me bought his house about 8 years ago, and he seems pretty stable. And as I go up the road, I've been pretty fortunate. I don't have a lot of turnaround with new people coming into my street to buy. And as far as my knowledge goes, I don't think anybody on my street there's probably 25 houses. I don't think any of them are a rental. And not that people who rent houses are bad, it's just you don't always get the diehard, this perfect kind of person. So I hope that gives you a little perspective on that.
Thank you.
Good luck. Tear it up out there, huh? But that gives you a little perspective on that. Cool?